to be able to learn that they are not the only person, that they're not alone in this. Ryan is sitting there, he's a chicken farmer, he's wearing ostrich boots, and he lives in the middle of nowhere. And yet as a parent, he's somehow expected to navigate his way around social media for his kids. So I think for us, for myself and my wife, again, with kids growing up in a digital age, for us the priority here is to, again, turn pain into purpose and provide as much support as well as a spotlight and a platform for these parents to come together, to heal together, to grieve together, but also to collectively focus on a solution so that no other family anywhere has to go through what they've been through. It just doesn't seem fair.
Yeah. And Meghan, what's your reaction to the last hour? These are families whose stories you've known for about a year, but if you just sat there as a mom, I wonder what was going through your mind.
Yeah, thank you for asking and also for being here with us. A year ago when we met some of the families, not all of them, at that time, it was impossible to not be in tears, as I'm sure so many of you have been today hearing these stories. You can hear the stories again and again and again. It's still going to have the same emotional impact because it's just that devastating. And as parents, though our kids are really young, they're 2.5 and 4.5, but social media is not going away. And look, I think by design, there was an entry point that's supposed to be positive and creating community. And something has devolved. And there's no way to hear that and not try to help these families have their stories be heard. My husband and I often say if there's going to be so much focus on what we're doing, then to try to focus on what we're focusing on, because their stories are what matter. And trying to safeguard so many other families from experiencing this level of pain. So for us, it's just, what is the solution? What can we do behind the scenes? What do we continue to do behind the scenes? How can we work with professionals and experts to really figure out, in knowing this is not going away, how do we make it safer, better, more positive, so that whether someone is losing a child or almost losing a child, those are some of the other stories we've heard, right? That, if a young girl's going on looking for healthy recipes, but an algorithm starts giving her nothing but inspiration and anorexia, and she's hospitalized as a result of that. There are so many twists and turns that can be avoided. So we're hoping to be part of that solution, all of us together as a community.
Dr. Murthy, you put out an advisory since you've been Surgeon General about mental health as it pertains to the youth. In May, you revised that and added sort of the social media impact on youth. I wonder, what are you hearing from parents across the country?
Well, Carson, first, I just also want to recognize the power and bravery of the parents that we met today. Honestly, in hearing your stories, I couldn't help but think of my own children who are 5 and 7. And, as a child, I struggled a lot with my own mental health. Didn't talk about it very much until recently. My parents loved me dearly, but I never talked to them about it because I was ashamed, and I thought somehow I did something that was my fault. But I look at my own kids, and I worry about them. And I know, despite being, a dad who's admittedly overprotective, and despite wanting to do everything I can for my kids, I know that I can't do it alone. And none of us as parents can protect our kids fully from the harms that are out there, can arm them with the tools and the strengths they need. We need each other. We need to be in an environment that's supporting the well-being of our kids, not detracting from it. And I just feel that what has happened that is so profoundly wrong here is that we have placed the entire burden of managing a rapidly evolving technology in social media that few people fully understand, that are designed by the best designers and product engineers in the world. And we put the entire burden of managing that on parents and kids. And I'll tell you that pitting the best designers in the world against our kids and parents, that is the definition of an unfair fight. And that's what we find ourselves contending with. I also just want to say that what was beautiful that was on display today was just the power of community. And how even in our deepest and darkest moments, and sometimes especially in those moments, we can help each other heal through our friendship, through our love and support. And that was so heartwarming to see just such beautiful examples of that today. It wouldn't have been possible without the Duke and the Duchess, without Harry and Meghan creating building this beautiful community. But it's what we need more of today, because there are a lot of people struggling. And I'll tell you, I had the privilege of traveling around the country meeting parents and talking to young people all across America. And so often they'll tell me about their struggles with their kids' mental health, but they'll almost say it in hushed tones because they think that they're the only ones who are struggling, or they'll think that, it's a reflection on their parenting. Somehow they failed as a parent because their kids are struggling. And I suspect that many of us may have felt that way in this room and we're watching from afar. But that's what happens when we're not supporting one another, we're not able to be open with one another, when we're not talking to each other. And so part of this effort to address the mental health crisis that we are in, and I use that word intentionally because it is a crisis. The word crisis gets applied to so many things today. But when you have nearly 3/4 of young people saying that they're struggling with loneliness, when you have a 57% increase in the suicide rate in the 10 years preceding the pandemic, when you have 1 in 3 high school girls saying that they seriously consider taking their own life, that is a crisis. And I think that the true measure of a society is how well it takes care of and protects its young people. And by that measure, we have a lot of work to do right by kids and to do right by their parents. That's why I issued the Surgeon General advisories on youth mental health and on social media and youth mental health, because I think that not just as a surgeon, but as a dad, I can't think of something that's more important for us to focus our attention and time and energy on. And frankly, especially when it comes to social media, we've taken too long to act. We have let down our kids and our parents. That's got to change now. And it's why I'm doing everything I can, certainly in my capacity, that I know that we got to do this together. And this is where I think parents also have such a powerful role. We were earlier today talking about MAD, an organization many of you may remember, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. I know you remember.
We remember
the mom.
Yes, and the talks that come to school, and hugely.
And for those of who may not remember MAD, it was an incredibly powerful movement of mothers who said, this drunk driving crisis that's leading so many of our loved ones to lose their lives, to be injured, to be disabled, we are going to do something about this. We're not going to accept this as just a price of modernity. We're not going to say, well, when automobiles come on the scene, well, we just have to accept this as a cost. They said the cost is too high, and we are going to do something about it. And that is what I think parents have the power to help us do today. They shouldn't have to take this entire burden on their own, but I know and I have seen firsthand that when parents use their voices, when they come together to call for change and to push for change, there are few voices that have the moral clarity and the strength that they do, and we need them more than ever.
Thank you for that. I get this sense there's a palpable feeling in what we've heard today from seemingly the majority of people, parents, that are really frustrated. When Taj was talking about how it's difficult when you're parenting, when Mr. and Mrs. Smith down the street a few blocks, their parenting rules as it pertains to social media and devices, their goalposts is totally different than ours as a family. Between that, how can we become more of a collective and get on the same page? Maybe it's passing laws in this area. That idea, the idea that where's the accountability in all this? Where are the tech companies? Why are they not making it more difficult? Where are they helping out? I wonder what your approach might be in the future to tackle some of these larger issues as parents just seem so frustrated.
Well, first of all, I think there's a reason why there's no one else working in this space, because of the size and the power of these companies. And I think people are scared and feel helpless, and I think we understand that. But there's nothing wrong with these kids. Any one of us in this room, to grow up with social media, would probably definitely react the same way. And I think we need to get out of this idea that the young kids, there's something wrong with them. It's the world that we're allowing to be created around them. Matthew and his team have 2,200 families looking for accountability, and that is approximately 10% of what we believe exists out there. So as the doctor says, we're already way behind actually solving the problem. But the one thing that always stands out for me is, yes, these platforms are addictive. I think we all accept that and agree. But as someone who works within those companies, as someone who designs them especially, because obviously they're not going away, new ones are going to be created, then do not send, or stop, please stop sending children content that you wouldn't want your own children to see. And I think it's a very simple request, and it's an easy fix. But again, as the dads up here said, well, it's all about the bottom line.
Right.
But if the shareholders of these companies can accept that they're going to get a little less profit out of it to make it a safe space, then that would stop the suffering.
It reminds me of driving through a neighborhood and it says, drive like your kids live here. You need more of that. Meghan, I wondered about, for any mom watching who hears the story, we were talking about it backstage, we're not talking about parents that are social media and technologically illiterate. These are people like Emma Claire's dad was saying, I knew the passwords. No, I have 4 kids, 3, 9, 11, and 14. I set up all their accounts. Like, I think I'm on it. And it's absolutely terrifying to think that some of us parents who think we're on it might not be on it enough or doing something wrong.
And I think we were talking about it just before, because again, the burden can't solely be on the parents, and for these parents who have experienced this extreme grief, to not feel burdened, to experience extreme guilt. It's not their fault. And many of the platforms that we've had conversations quietly behind the scenes with these tech executives, and they do feel that they have created, and they have, many of them created, parental controls and certain guardrails, much of which many parents, if you aren't tech savvy, you can't navigate that comfortably. It feels pretty overwhelming. So there has to be a better solution than that, of course. And I think equally, and every country has different guardrails on things like this. We've had insight sessions. We were just in Germany. We had one with parents there. My husband's done them in the UK, and obviously we've done a collective of families across the States. But as we've also discussed with, the tech space and online harms has been important just prior to working specifically with families. And it's Tristan Harris, who's a friend of ours that we started working with a few years ago, founder of Center for Humane Technology. And Tristan had said, just like when something is invented, let's take the car, for example. When the car was first invented, there wasn't a seatbelt. You could smoke inside of your car. And what happened? People started to get hurt. People started to die. So you started to change the car. You would put in safeguards so that this new piece of something that is part of our evolution is adapting to keep people safe. Right now, even if you're veering off into the lane, maybe you're getting a little sleepy, you'll go beep, 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 bring you right back to where you're safe. And so as we watch the evolution of social media and the internet, what are those same modifications we need to make to ensure that just like that car, we are adapting to the times, because people are getting hurt and people, specifically children, are dying. How do we fix that? And I think it will take all of us on so many different levels, from grassroots level, of course, probably to policy, to be able to keep our families and our children safe.
I think everything has been adapted. About the 10-year point or just after. We are 17 years into this, I think. So the big question is, how come social media isn't being adapted?
Right, where are seatbelts?
Exactly. But again, it's the pushback is, well, you don't really understand. So how can we understand when you're not being transparent?
Right. What are some next steps from a public health standpoint?
So the good news is there is a lot that we can do. And I say that explicitly because sometimes it can feel like this is just a huge wave that's washing over us and we're powerless in the face of it. From a policy perspective, though, we can establish safety standards the way Meghan was referencing and that Tristan and others have talked about as well. These are safety standards that would reduce the likelihood that kids are exposed to harmful content, including bullying and harassment. It's concerning to me that 6 out of 10 girls say that they are harassed by someone on social media that they don't even know. The other thing that we can do with safety standards is also protect kids from exposure to the kind of tools and features that would manipulate them into excessive use. Now, this is a problem because social media is stealing time away from critical activities for a child's well-being, like sleep, like in-person interaction, like physical activity. And about a third of adolescents saying that they're staying up until midnight or later on school nights on their devices, and much of that is social media use. That matters because when kids, especially during adolescence, are sleep deprived, it actually increases their risk of mental health conditions, right? The other thing that we can do is we can require transparency from these companies in terms of their data. You know, when we were putting together our advisory, we spoke to experts from around the country who have studied this area, and in fact from other countries as well. They all had the same thing to say, which is that they cannot get transparent information from the companies. They get a little bit, not all of it. And as a parent, I don't want to feel like a company is hiding information from me about the product that my child is using. Like, why is that okay? You know, we have, thankfully in our country and many countries now, if I buy a car seat for my child, as I have two for my children, I know that they met a safety standard and they're safe, right? I know that's true for many of the foods that my kids eat. I know it's true for the toys they play with. Yet we have millions of children on social media, and we don't have adequate safety standards in place. This is a place where policymakers can make a difference. But there are also things that the companies need to do. You know, ideally, if they were doing what they needed to do, none of these things would be required, but they're not. They're not stepping up to do enough. I'm not saying they're not trying. Perhaps they're doing a little bit here and there, but the proof is in the pudding, and the pudding is rotten. It's telling us that our kids are still struggling and they're suffering. And without being able to transparently share the data that tells us, here's what we are trying, here's the impact it's having on our children, here's what's working, here's what's not, it's hard to have full trust that enough is actually being done. Lastly, I'll say this, when it comes to individuals, like parents, and kids and community members, this is a place where I do think we have a role too. And this is not easy because the horse has certainly left the barn in terms of utilization of social media, and we need to get it to a place where it's safe for our kids to use. But until that time comes, what we have to ask ourselves is, number one, can we delay the age at which our kids start using social media? This is something my wife and I are planning to do for our kids. I am under zero illusions that that is easy to do. The amount of peer pressure that our kids are on,
What's the
on
age?
these devices. Sorry?
What's your age?
So here's what we're going to do. We're going to wait until after middle school, because we know that middle school years are a particularly sensitive time of brain development, social development for adolescents. And we're going to reevaluate when they're in high school based on what the data says and based on whether safety standards exist and based on their own maturity. But I know that it's going to be super hard for us to do. So what we're going to need is to work together and partner with other parents. Because it's a lot easier to do if you are part of a group of parents that says, you know, we're all going to do this for our kids. And if our kid says, I'm the only one who's not on it, then I can say, no, Harry and Meghan's kids aren't on it either. And then they can talk to their kids and be like, okay, fine, we're on the same boat. But I have now talked to so many young people across the country whose parents made that decision or who made that decision with their parents when they were 12, 13, 14 years old. And now a few years later say, thank you. That was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was really hard at the time, but I'm not struggling with the kind of anxieties and worries that my kids are. Now, if your kids are already on social media, as many kids are, the question is, what do you do? Well, here I think it's really important for us to create tech-free zones in our children's lives. That could be the hour before they go to bed. It could be the hour after they wake up. It could be time at dinner. It could be time when they're hanging out with their friends. But the reason that's so important is because for too many people, the experience of social media has become the experience of constantly comparing yourself to other people, being bullied or harassed, and being surrounded by negativity. And unfortunately, by algorithms, the way they work in the current social media platforms, a lot of that gets amplified, right? And so having a break from that is critical, and being able to supplement that with rest, with time with the people that you love, with family and friends, is absolutely essential. Again, none of this is easy to do alone, which is why as parents we need to start talking about these issues. We need to partner and support one another, because a lot of parents out there are feeling like they're the only ones struggling with this, and that it reflects their failure as a parent if their kid is having a hard time with their mental health. That is absolutely not the case.
Thank you so much. Harry, what do you think what does the healthy social media environment look like to you in the future when you think about this work that your foundation is doing?
To be honest, I don't know. As a dad, I don't know. As a human, I'm not sure. I think social media is going to evolve in different shapes and sizes as time goes on. AI is the new thing. So that will distract everybody from the harms of social media. But at the same time, there's a huge amount of creative space on these platforms, and I think it's what they always focus on. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that there's creativity there. But when they turn around and say, "Oh, the harm's a drop in the ocean," well, if you've got 4 billion people on social media, then a drop in the ocean may seem small, but it's huge. It's hundreds of millions of people. So I think it just, again, awareness of what it does to you when you're on it and you're scrolling. I don't know how many people throughout a day have been scrolling through social media and suddenly come away from it feeling as though your eyes are now squared and your brain is now sort of like a sponge or melted. But I think, again, for kids, we have to do more to protect them because they don't know any better. They don't know any different. And therefore, once you go down that rabbit hole, you get pulled in. And just as much as these platforms, these devices are, super addictable and very important for a lot of kids to communicate with other kids, especially when they need support, then it's very hard as a parent to take the device away. As you said, like once they're on it, they're on it. And you can cause real problems by taking it away. So we have to do more at the entry point, whether there's an induction process or whether there's a licensing. I mean, Germany's fantastic at licensing pretty much everything in life. And, some people will be against that and some people will be for it. But I do think that we all need to be very, very aware of what it does to you when you're on social media for all this time, and that in small doses, to connect with other people and to be able to share how you're feeling and to help and support each other, I think is really important. But it's down to awareness. Otherwise, before you know it, you're a very healthy, super happy, confident, successful child who has nothing wrong with them is taking their own life.
Well said. Thank you. Meghan, for you, just finally, it seems like to us, you guys have so much on your plate, and I wonder, just as a mom of 2 young kids, after the stories that we heard today from these families that you have gotten to know over the past year and the work that Archewell's doing in this space, like where is this now, this social media as it pertains to the youth, your 2 kids' mental, where is that now on a priority list? Not as a kick-ass woman, but as a mom. Excuse my French.
Thank you. Being a mom is the most important thing in my entire life, and outside, of course, being a wife to this one. But I will say, I feel fortunate that our children are at an age, again, quite young, so this isn't in our immediate future. But I also feel frightened by how it's continuing to change, and this will be in front of us. As they say, being a parent, the days are long, but the years are short. So it worries me, but I'm also given a lot of hope and a lot of energy by the progress we've made in the past year, being able to have these incredible parents, these survivors of this experience, to share their stories. It allows us to continue to learn, and the more information we have, the more information gathering we're able to do, the more we can have these high-level conversations and try to move the needle a little bit. I just think anyone who's a parent, and by the way, even if you're not a parent, you see your friends affected, you see adults who are affected by this. Everyone now is affected by the online world and social media, some more than others. But we all just want to feel safe. You want to feel community, you want to feel connected, especially post the pandemic, but you want to feel safe. And in that, I think so much of it can come down to, if someone is looking for something, please don't feed them the thing that they're not looking for that's going to harm them. The algorithms are very powerful. But I am confident that with more ears, and as my husband said, awareness and visibility on what is really happening, that we can make some significant change together.
Well, we're very lucky to get the visibility of you guys to put your attention to this. It's going to be immeasurably impactful. Doctor?
Kristen, just one last thing to share. I mean, I couldn't agree more with what both of you just said. And the one thing I don't want anyone who's watching today to walk away is thinking that, God, this is going to be too hard to solve. There's too much to do here. There are too many mountains to move that are just huge and immovable. But you know what? As a country, we have done hard things before. You know, we came together with Europe to help rebuild the continent after World War II. That wasn't easy, right? We stood down terrible forces over the last century, including fascism in Germany. That wasn't easy. We have done hard things. And each and every day, in communities all across our country, moms and dads are waking up and doing hard things in their communities. Like, we are not beyond doing the difficult. And this is a time where we have to summon that spirit of resilience and strength and recognize that we don't have to do it alone, but we can actually rely on each other and lean on each other to create the kind of environment where our kids really can thrive. It will require pushing and advocating for the right public policies. It'll require making tough decisions in our own families. It'll require being open in ways that sometimes will feel uncomfortable about the struggles we may be having at home, but which will ultimately give strength to other parents and families who are struggling too. But that's what we're called to do now. Because there's a word that one of the dads used earlier that we just went into it, which is the word love. And I find that to be such a powerful word because it summons in my heart and in my mind the true spirit of what guides us as to whether we're on the right track or the wrong track. And when it comes to our kids, I think often, like, what does it look like for a society to truly love its children? Well, I think it looks like pulling out all the stops to make sure that they're taken care of. We know that because it's what we do as parents, right, for our children. We need to stand up as a society and do that for our kids. And it's not about whether you have kids yourself or not. You could be an aunt or an uncle. You could be somebody who has kids in your neighborhood and sees them going to the nearby school. We all need our kids to succeed. The future of society depends on our kids. And our kids are telling us through story and statistics that they are struggling, that they are suffering. And the only question is, are we going to heed that call? Are we going to respond with the urgency and the action that's required? And I think we have to. Because the day after, I remember hearing a story about a young mom whose child passed away, took her own life after being mercilessly bullied on 7 different social media accounts on 3 different platforms that she had set up. I remember coming home that night and hugging my own 2 kids and feeling honestly a bit helpless as a dad, thinking, how am I going to protect my kids from what this mother just went through with her own child? And I dare say a lot of parents were thinking the same thing. And the thing is, we can't let parents feel like they're alone in that fight. And so that's why if you're out there, whether you're a parent or not, if you have a parent in your life, reach out to them, talk to them about how their kids are doing, ask them how they're thinking about managing social media, open up a channel for them to talk about an issue that affects all of us. And if we can manage to check on one another and show up for one another more in our lives, we can do a lot. We can get through a lot, and we can help build the movement that we need to ultimately protect the mental health and well-being of our children.
Thank you for that. And Meghan, the Group Duchess of Sussex, thank you so much. And to all the tireless workers at Archewell Foundation, we hope this discussion continues not just on World Mental Health Day, but in the weeks and months and years to come. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much. Thank you.